call the meeting to order and take roll call.
Brad Freese,
Here.
Russ Redmond, Clay Damon,
Here.
Jill Wenta, Michelle Strauss,
Here.
Thomas Bradford.
Here.
All right. Approval of agenda. Anyone want to add, delete, modify the agenda as submitted?
I'm fine with it.
No?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
I'll second.
All right. That passes. Next, communication from citizens. No citizen. Well,
No.
we have citizens, but would you like to speak?
I have a number. I have an agenda item number.
Okay. All right. All right. So,
I have a number.
we'll go to presentations then. Straight to presentations. Number 1, election of new chair. Oh no, that's new business.
There's no presentation, so right to new.
Oh, okay. I saw presentations down here. So this is part of new business. Got it. Okay, consent agenda.
Is that the minutes? Whether,
There's nothing under it.
do we have minutes on here for this meeting? Megan, do we have any minutes for this meeting that was on the face of the agenda?
I don't have any minutes on this agenda right now.
Okay, all right.
Well, so we passed.
So we can, I think if that.
Motion to table,
Mm-hmm.
since we don't have the minutes.
Are they listed in writing that they would be there on the agenda? I'm just looking at your screen, so I don't have to
No.
open mine.
Yeah, it's not on the.
It's
agenda
not on
itself.
I think we can walk away from it because there's nothing on the consent agenda.
All right. All right. To the regular agenda then. Old business, blank. Now let's go to new business. Election of new chair.
Sure. So Jessica Namath, the chair, stepped down off the board recently. So because of that, we'll have to appoint a new chair and potentially vice chair if Mr. Freeze is appointed chair. So with that said, I'll open up to the board for discussion and a vote.
I'll start. I can't do it.
Do
I'll
what?
be chair. I'll tell you why. So you know I resigned in roughly late November of 2023 because I was going to be temporarily on the council. I could not hold both positions. And unbeknownst to you guys, I also resigned from the Rotary Club of Palm Beach because I could not continue as treasurer because I assumed that the council work would be too much. So at that point, Jessica became chair, approximately that time, because she was vice chair. And so in early April, my term on the council ended, and I've already made arrangements with the Rotary Club of Palm Beach that I would basically the de facto administrator of the club. I'm not the treasurer anymore, which I really don't want to be, because for a lot of reasons. But so I'm pretty much back to where I was before, and I'm busy, so I really don't have the time to be the chair anymore. The best I could do is be the vice chair, but I cannot be the chair because I will be totally overwhelmed. And I will just add a footnote. Some of you may know that the Florida legislature for the 2024 legislature passed laws that have specific things that the HOAs and property owners associations have to do, and they have deadlines. The first deadline is October 1, the second deadline is January 1. I'm the president of the Tequesta Civic Association. I have to stay on top of all of that. It means changing rules and regs and websites and documents thereon and creating documents that don't currently exist. So I'm going to be swamped at least till January 1.
Your excuse.
Brad, do you have interest to step in as chair?
I mean, I would be happy to to chair the committee.
Wonderful. Well,
That's perfect. I mean, it's kind of like unfortunate time because we just, I felt like, had this conversation in the last several, I guess, 2 months. Yeah, and I had said kind of, then I just joined here. This is my first year on the committee. I am spread thin myself. I'm on the Realtor Association board. I'm on my HOA board. I'm here to learn and pick up and contribute how I can this first year. So I just, wouldn't be in a position, but it's wonderful that it sounds like you at least step in as chair. So that's kind of where I'm at.
And I don't want to make it seem like I've got all the free time in the world, but I'll do everything
everybody does. No.
that I can for the committee.
You know, we're all busy because we're busy people do this, right?
Yes.
And we, and historically, Mr. Bradford had really managed the agenda and did a lot of work there. We now have, 2 full-time staff members. We can help with the agenda a lot more, where we'll typically have a few items that we have prepared to bring forward, and then, if you have some items, you can, so we'll kind of collaborate, usually, a week or 2 before the agenda even go out. So we'll try and make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, appreciate that.
So can I make a motion to accept Brad as our new chair?
Second. So you got a motion, a first and a second, and I guess we do roll call, right? How do we do this here, all in favor? Is it roll call? I forgot what we used to do. Is it roll call or all in favor signify by saying aye? I forgot.
Yeah, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks.
All against?
Yeah.
Congrats, bro.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would like to nominate Tom here as vice chair.
I can do that because it's not,
Yeah, as a labor.
the work would be sporadic, if any, and I will continue to contribute when I have time. Like, I did a few documents that I gave to Jay, and, I did my homework based on what I thought I was supposed to do from the last meeting. Some of it's on here. So I won't stop, but
Right.
it's just gonna be spotty.
I make a motion to fill our vice chair
Pardon?
position. Is that it, or vice chair? Yeah.
Sounds good.
Vice chair
A second.
position.
Everyone in
All
favor,
four?
say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Oh, there's with Jill.
Is that Jill?
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm a few minutes late.
All right, moving on. Jay, Living Shorelines Draft Code.
All right. So this was in your agenda packet. I don't know if you had time to read through it. It's kind of a complicated issue, so I'll try and summarize it a little bit for you. So as you recall, in December of 2023, we brought forward kind of a little presentation about living shorelines and shared a little bit about what Jupiter's done for their living shorelines code. Of course, this isn't working. Bear with me here. Just run through the click through for me. Next slide. So what is a living shoreline? It's a shoreline management practice that provides erosion control, protects, restores, and enhances natural shoreline habitat, and maintains coastal processes. There's a variety of different types of living shorelines you can do. The most common ones we have here is riprap revetments and mangroves. But you can also do oyster reefs and a lot of other interesting things. Next slide. So what is shoreline armoring? That's known as hard infrastructure, like the placement of seawalls, bulkheads, retaining walls. 14% of the U.S. coastline has been armored, but Palm Beach County is a much higher rate, so it's about between 50 and 75%. Next slide, Mike. So the problems with shoreline armoring, it creates a fixed point in relation to rising sea levels and coastal flooding. So this is a challenge with resiliency and sea level rise. Another big issue we have is kind of water quality and loss of habitat due to an abrupt transition from the shoreline to water. So you really lose that intertidal zone where you have a lot of different sea life, which of course enhances water quality as well. Also, seawalls will eventually fail, and there's a high cost to repair or replace them. The general timeline for seawalls is about 40 to 50 years. They can last much longer if you actually incorporate living shorelines elements like riprap and mangroves. Next slide. So again, what do living shorelines do? They protect shorelines by improving stability and reducing erosion. They're a less expensive and sustainable option to traditional seawalls, provide essential habitat for fish and other animals, improve water quality, create feeding areas for birds, encourage seagrass growth, and they reduce sediment in the water. So a lot of different benefits. Next slide. So the Village of Tequesta Code. We do not currently have any regulations regarding bulkhead and seawall construction or the placement of fill waterward of property lines. So this means it's difficult for our building department to actually regulate the construction of bulkheads and seawalls without having defined regulations. So I started out essentially writing a living shorelines code, but as I've dug deeper into it, I found a lot of kind of gaps in our code. So what you'll see today, there's a few things in here that we probably need to discuss in December. In 2015, the town of Jupiter did adopt new regulations that required some elements of living shorelines only when bulkheads or revetments are replaced. So they're not mandating anyone to come in and do living shorelines on their existing bulkhead or seawall. And also in 2019, the Village of North Palm Beach underwent an extensive rewrite of its bulkhead and seawall code with the assistance of a local coastal engineer. And this is relevant because I worked on that project. The Village of North Palm Beach actually paid this coastal engineer quite a bit of money, and basically everything he did is very applicable to here, right? North Palm Beach happens to have a lot more canals and waterways than we even do, so it was really a big undertaking at the time, and we can really, I think, incorporate a lot of things from that into our code. Yes, Mr. Bradford?
In the beginning of your conversation about this screen you said something about December. What did you mean in regard to December?
Oh, in our December presentation, so I gave a December presentation about living shorelines, and it was really focused mostly on kind of what Jupiter did with, you know, encouraging people to put mangroves and riprap in.
Yeah.
But as I've looked into our code, you know, I realized we don't really even have any kind of regulations for bulkheads and seawalls or the placement of fill, right? So in North Palm Beach, we found that people would come in, the coastal marine contractors would come in and do some dredge and fill and extend people's property lines. And if you don't have a code in place to enforce that, to punish them for that, you can't really do anything about it.
Right.
Our code is really silent about that issue, so I'll get into it a little bit later, but there's just a few gaps I found in our code as I was doing a kind of a
And
deeper
your
dive.
December presentation was to the village council?
It was to this
To the
board.
EAC?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? You must have. It was probably the first meeting you were on.
Yes, that's okay. All right, you're right.
So I apologize, but
No.
you probably saw the council one.
I did see the council one, yeah.
So it was pretty much the same one.
Okay.
Excellent. Click it again. So, you know, really, as you see, and as you all know, right, Tequesta and Jupiter really share the Loxahatchee and a lot of different, you know, waterways and very similar communities, waterfront-wise. So it makes sense, you know, to somewhat mirror what they're doing. We've looked at their code, and I think, you know, and also learned a few examples from challenges they had in their code, and I think have made ours very similar to theirs, but maybe cleaned it up a little bit and even simplified it a little more. Next slide. So there's, I think, 8 or 9 issues I discovered. The first issue is hardening shorelines. A lot of stuff in the comp plan says, you know, bulkheads and seawalls shall be permitted only to stabilize disturbed shorelines or to replace deteriorated existing bulkheads and seawalls. And then this other policy says that the village should only consider hard structures such as seawalls only when other alternatives are unavailable. So really the village, the comp plan wants to encourage the natural shorelines to remain in their natural element, and when there's riprap to kind of remain, you know, riprap and not harden. So what we did is in the draft code said that bulkheads and seawalls shall be permitted only to stabilize disturbed shorelines or to replace deteriorated existing bulkheads or seawalls. So if you have a failing seawall or bulkhead, you're able to replace it. But if you have a natural shoreline or riprap, the way that the draft code is written, we're encouraging you to keep it as is and use things like living shorelines to stabilize your shoreline. But we did create So if you see in the bottom paragraph there, so we said properties with natural shorelines shall attempt to utilize living shorelines techniques to stabilize their shoreline in lieu of armoring it with a bulkhead or seawall. But we also kind of wrote a little caveat at the end there where the building official and the community development director, which is myself, must mutually consent to allow the construction of a new bulkhead or seawall when it can be proven that construction of a bulkhead or seawall is necessary to stabilize the disturbed shoreline. So there may be some instances where you won't be able to use living shorelines techniques to stabilize things. So if someone were to get a coastal engineer and kind of prove that to the building official, myself, we could in that case consent to a bulkhead or seawall. Yes.
This is one of my questions that
Sure.
I had. I see disturbed quite a bit. I mean, there's no definition
Right.
technically,
That's my
so
Sure.
basically the building official and yourself right now, it would be left up to you. I don't have a problem with that.
Sure.
If you, I don't know who the building official is, but I know you. It's just your next person, the predecessor.
Always, yeah.
You know,
I'm always
like,
thinking that when I write code
it's
too.
a very subjective thing, right?
Sure.
It would be nice to have at least something that said what disturbed is.
What is it? What are you referring to, disturbed shoreline?
So it's really taken from that existing comprehensive plan policy at the top to stabilize the disturbed shorelines. It's really a difficult thing to kind of quantify. So if anyone has a suggestion to how to quantify it, I'm happy to consider it. But
What-
Or maybe like some bullet points like, okay, as a guide to understanding what a disturbed shoreline is, and these are some of the elements that may be present that would qualify it as a disturbed shoreline.
that's a good suggestion.
What is an example?
Erosion.
So if somewhere was getting a lot of wave action, it was a natural shoreline and was getting a lot of wave action, and the beach or the natural shoreline was just eroding, and it was, maybe they had a pool and it was getting into the foundation of the pool, or
Okay.
foundation of maybe that they have a back deck and the deck is failing. So there's a lot of different
Okay.
ways to do that. It's just, as we said, it's tough to.
So something has occurred that compromises the integrity of it staying as a natural shoreline.
Sure.
Okay.
One-
Whether it's man-made or not.
Correct. And one option that you guys may want to consider is, rather than it being an administrative approval from the building official and community development director, you could require that it goes to the planning and zoning board. So they currently look at all zoning variances in the residential zoning districts, which I will talk about later as well. But you could say that they have the burden of proof is on them to go before the planning and zoning board, and we could maybe establish a little bit more criteria. So that's an option if you want to consider it. Yes?
Is it okay? I have a number of comments on this, but is it okay that I wait till you're done and then?
You can jump in the middle as they come up, or wait till the end. So I'm happy to either way.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay. Okay. Next slide. So here's a shoreline assessment that Jupiter Inlet District did in 2013. Showed 65% bulkhead, 14% rock, and 21% natural. Now that includes Jupiter and some unincorporated areas, but kind of gives you a feel that we do still have some natural areas and some rock revetment areas to protect. Next slide. So the other issue is establishing seawall and bulkhead setbacks. So this is something that we don't have in the code. I essentially took what we did in North Palm Beach, which was, again, looked at by a coastal engineer and heavily vetted there, and pretty much took it over here. So it says that when seawalls and bulkheads are being repaired, where the total cost is more than 50% of replacement cost, it shall meet these new standards. So that basically means when it's a substantial renovation, right? If someone has some minor repairs, they can make it and not have to meet the new code. But when it's a major repair, they have to meet these criteria. So the big one is saying new seawalls and bulkheads cannot be constructed beyond the rear property line, but an existing seawall may be reconstructed 18 inches water side of the property. And that is necessary because, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with how that happens, but you have to keep the existing bulkhead or seawall in place replace it with a new one. So it's very difficult to not do that without letting it go a little bit beyond the property line. And then also, there's a provision that says, seawall caps shall extend no further than 3 feet from the wet face of the bulkhead. So seawall caps, you'll see some pictures of them later, but sometimes they protrude out, and sometimes they even look good when they protrude out a little bit, but you don't want them hanging out 5 feet or 10 feet, because someone could technically do that and basically create like a deck and have chairs and good stuff out there. So next slide. Issue number 3 is establishing seawall and bulkhead height. So this is kind of back to the resiliency question. Water thirsty. Lost my water. All right. So there's 3 different comp plan provisions here that kind of relate to this. It says that we should adopt and implement strategies that increase community resiliency from the impacts of sea level rise. That we should increase community resiliency and protect property infrastructure from the impacts of climate change, sea level rise, changes in rainfall patterns, extreme weather events. The last one says we shall utilize best practices and initiate mitigation strategies to reduce the risk of flooding in coastal areas from high tide, storm surge, etc. Next slide. So in 2019, the North Palm Beach staff and the coastal engineer I mentioned, Alan Gerwig and Associates. And one interesting thing there too is in North Palm Beach, we specifically got a coastal engineer that works in South Florida and in Palm Beach County, but did not do a lot of work in that municipality. So Charlie Eiseminger is a really well-known local coastal engineer. We specifically didn't use him because we didn't want him to be writing the code that he would then be using. So Alan Gerwig was an unbiased coastal engineer that came in, and he evaluated king tide level data. As everyone knows, the king tide levels seem to be getting much higher. And then sea level rise projections by the Southeast Florida Climate Change Compact. And that was used to establish appropriate minimum and maximum seawall heights. So properties that are in the X and X500 zones in the draft code can have a seawall cap elevation of 4 feet and then a maximum seawall cap elevation of 4.5 feet. And so X and X500 is seemingly about half of our waterfront areas. So that's not an actual flood zone. You're not required to pay flood insurance when you're in that, but it's says you're somewhat close to flood-prone areas, but you're not in an actual mandatory flood insurance flood zone. Properties in the special flood hazard area, which is the AE zone, those are ones that do have mandatory flood insurance from mortgage lenders. Those can be a little bit higher. So the minimum cap is still 4 feet. But the maximum seawall cap is 6 inches higher, so it's about 5 feet. And so that was just taking into account long-term issues. A lot of times when people are building new bulkheads and seawalls, they're planning for the future. They want to be able to go high. Some people sometimes don't want to go too high. So establishing that 4-foot minimum ensures that it's at a relatively good level as far as preventing future flood events, and then having that maximum gives them a little bit of wiggle room to go a little bit higher than maybe they would like to, but without it going too high. Next slide. The other issue is compatibility between properties, right? You have a lot of instances when you're allowing people to build larger seawalls where the new seawall is higher than the adjacent property owner. So what we've tried to do is ensure that there are minimum impacts. So seawall caps at an elevation greater than the adjacent property shall have a wall return of the same material and type. So this ensures that they're still using quality materials on the outside of the seawall. You see they're using the same material on the neighbor's property as they are on their own seawall. And it also says that they should have a finish appearance equivalent to or better than painted concrete stucco. So again, we would end up looking pretty similar to this. It ensures that your neighbors aren't looking at an ugly seawall. The issue with, the last issue is where it says seawall caps at a greater elevation of neighboring properties shall also provide a drainage plan that demonstrates there will be no sheet flow of water to the waterway and adjacent properties, and the building official will review the plan to ensure there's no major erosion or degradation of adjacent properties. So the village's building official, Wayne Cameron, also came from North Palm with me, so he has reviewed
countless docks and seawalls. We were constantly getting new ones there. And so when he and I were talking through the code, you know, he's noticed that there's challenges where, you know, like I said, with you know, flooding issues or potential erosion issues when someone builds the taller seawall. So he and I wanted to put this in the code just so that he could make sure that there were no kind of egregious instances happening. And of course, he has a little bit of discretion in this case, but you know, he does a good job of, I think, looking out for property owners. Next slide. So issue number 5, you know, is one of the big ones is creating living shorelines. The top left is just a seawall with a riprap revetment. The top right is a riprap revetment with some mangroves. Same thing with the bottom right. And then the bottom left is, I believe it's just riprap. There might be a seawall back there too. Next slide. So we have a few different comp plan provisions that kind of encourage, you know, water quality, enhancing water quality. The first one is, you know, utilizing management practices which will alleviate residential water pollution problems. The second one is revising existing code provisions related to water quality, shoreline stabilization, wetland preservation, and wildlife and habitat protection. The third one is cooperating with agencies and municipalities to protect the resources of Loxahatchee and Indian River Lagoon by actively participating in the development of estuarine policies that are consistent with present management. So obviously with Jupiter already adopting these regulations, what we would be doing here, we're you know, kind of cooperating with what Jupiter's doing to protect the Loxahatchee. And then of course, I think Jalona is doing some stuff to create living shorelines when they do new projects. So, you know, I think it's just the general direction that I think a lot of people wanted to go towards with keeping the Loxahatchee clean. Next slide. So the way to do this is to, when a new bulkhead is constructed or when an existing one is replaced, 100% of the bulkhead or seawall shall be faced with riprap or mangroves. So this would obviously exclude a dock or a pier area that goes perpendicular to the dock or to the bulkhead. And this is what Jupiter's code essentially says. And so then within 2 years of final inspection of the bulkhead, at least 10% of the shoreline shall be comprised of established mangroves. So that gives people time to, when they, you know, you install your bulkhead or seawall, you face it with some riprap and you start installing some mangroves. And the hope is that within 2 years, you'll start having a spread that's at least 10% of mangroves. And then if after 2 years of final inspection, it is less than 10%, then 20% shall be planted with mangroves right there. So it's a little bit punitive, right? It says that if you didn't hit your 10% number, you've got to come in and just plant 20%. But the long-term goal is to have, you know, riprap with, you know, some mangrove kind of spread throughout the bulkhead and seawall.
But you're giving the person the option, either riprap or mangroves?
So
Are you requiring...
it's riprap or mangroves, but there's kind of a minimum amount that has to be mangroves, right? So.
Okay.
So 100% has to be riprap or mangroves, but at least 10% of that 100% has to be mangroves,
Gotcha, okay.
right?
Oh.
I understand.
I know. The way Jupiter wrote the code was a little tricky. I tried simplifying a little bit, but that's essentially what it means.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Bradford.
So I'm sketchy on this. Do many people plant mangroves inside of riprap?
It's outside the riprap.
It's outside.
Yes.
Well then, how is it that I think I see mangroves actually coming out of riprap?
I think they do at times. I mean, you can do it either way. I'm not an expert in the planting of it, but.
Okay, I thought that it kind of, you know, like you may plant them on the outside of the bulkhead in the water, obviously, but they're going to get a certain size and they're going to have seeds and they're going to drop in and maybe that's how it happens. I don't know.
Probably.
Wonder too. I just want to make so you can use either riprap or mangroves, but in addition to the riprap, you also would have to have at least 10% of mangroves.
Correct, yeah, so somebody could do 100% mangroves if they wanted to, but they could not do 100% riprap.
Okay,
They'd have to do 90% riprap with a minimum of 10%
okay.
mangroves.
And the 10% is, there's not a specific layout that you have to follow.
There's not, yeah,
Okay.
it gives them, because each property is different, there's different types of mangroves, it gives them a little bit of flexibility to,
Okay,
To
so it'd be
design
10% of the shoreline length.
correct.
Okay.
And it gives them flexibility to place the mangroves where, you know, they may want to
Views.
preserve a sunset view on this portion of the property,
Right.
and so it gives them a little wiggle room to do that. We also, in following what Jupiter did, they created a shoreline exemption map, which basically says in canals, you don't have to do any of these things. Makes a lot of sense. You don't have enough room in the canals to do this, and most people in canals don't even have docks or piers. They basically just, you know, park their boats right up to the bulkhead and seawall. So it's really kind of onerous to require them to do this. And the next slide, I'll show you what that is. Hold on though, Meg. Also, a good provision we took from the Jupiter Code is where riprap or mangroves will disturb existing seagrasses, or when another jurisdictional agency like DEP or the Army Corps denies a permit, the riprap or mangroves would not be required. So that's only when they deny the permit for the mangrove or riprap. So if someone was trying to do riprap and DEP said, no, you can't do the riprap there, they'd be exempt from it. Next slide. So there's our shoreline exemption map. You see it's, there's, what do we have, four canals? So those would be exempt from the requirements. So it's only the portion that's inside of it, so the ones that are actually have double, like a frontage on the Loxahatchee and the canal, they would still have to do the living shoreline on the Loxahatchee portion, but not on the interior portion.
So, quick question.
Sure.
So, I always forget which one's north. The one on the left is the Loxahatchee, and the one on the right is the North Fork?
North Fork, yeah.
Okay, so the North Fork all falls into Cuesta, both sides, east and west?
No.
No,
It's,
Martin County starts somewhere.
I can
So-
show you if you want me to.
Sure.
If you look here.
do you see the
Jay,
red?
Jay, you correct me. Starting here, this is Anchorage Point, it's unincorporated
Yep.
Yeah.
Palm Beach County.
Okay.
This is town of Jupiter.
Yep.
Okay.
This is Tequesta. This is unincorporated Palm Beach County to there, and all the way up is unincorporated Palm Beach County.
Okay, and then this side over here?
This is
unincorporated Palm
either
Beach.
county and or town of Jupiter. I'm not sure which. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So our affected areas for our ordinances would be on the east side of the Loxahatchee River and
Mhm.
portions throughout here, but on the east side of the fork, but also apply to the west side. So the two main areas are the west and the west side, east and west side. So are the unincorporated areas considering and also looking at ordinances for shoreline, living
Not that
shoreline
I'm,
we
not that
know
I'm
of?
aware, just that the county's got so much going on that I'm not aware of them doing anything.
Just curious.
Just a quick question. So all of this would apply to any people having waterfront frontage on the intracoastal as well, right?
Correct. That is correct.
Because we do go, right, okay.
This map just shows, because this is the shoreline exemption map, these are the only areas where we have canals. So there are some other waterfront portions, as Mr. Bradford said, in the Indian River Lagoon, but they're not part of the shoreline exemption.
Okay.
Next slide. All right, so issue number 6 is revetments. So it's pretty similar to the last part. So it just says existing revetments may be replaced with a new revetment according to the following regulations. And again, this is pretty similar to Jupiter's code. 100% of the revetment shall be faced with riprap or mangroves when at least 50% of it is replaced. An existing revetment that has clean materials can remain and be reinforced with new riprap, so you can kind of repair an existing riprap if it has the right materials. If it's got unclean materials, it shall be removed prior to replacement. So there are some older ones where they didn't use, environmentally friendly materials for the riprap. Those would not be able to be replaced. They'd have to be completely removed. Once again, properties on the shoreline exemption map are exempt. And then similar to the provision we had in the part where we're trying to protect the existing natural shorelines, properties that have existing revetments shall attempt to utilize living shorelines techniques to stabilize the shoreline in lieu of armoring it. So the similar thing where we're trying to not let people harden the shoreline when there's an existing revetment. Next slide.
Quick question on that photo. The riprap on that particular piece of property compared to riprap on another photo is quite a difference. How do we establish how much riprap? I guess it's by a cubic yard.
Yeah, there's some technical standards in the code. I didn't want to
Okay,
get into the.
it just came to mind when I saw that picture of that one.
So this is the fill permit process I mentioned to you earlier. So there's some provisions in the comp plan about this. It says no dredging or filling shall be permitted within mangrove wetland areas or seagrass beds. The other one says the village shall preserve and protect existing seagrasses as a vital flood zone by prohibiting dredging and filling. And then also that we shall prohibit the disturbance of sensitive seagrass beds and productive mangrove and high marsh areas. So essentially what we're trying to do is get a permit if anyone's trying to do fill, because people will come in unpermitted and damage existing seagrass or other environmentally sensitive areas. And so without having kind of a code in place to kind of punish people, it's hard to take code enforcement action on them. Next slide. So we currently do not have any prohibition on dredging and filling on properties waterward of the property line. So I created a fill permit process that's in the draft code. I did copy the process we used in North Palm Beach. We found it to be pretty effective. And essentially it says no fill shall be made, deposited, or maintained in the waters of the Loxahatchee, waterward or outward of any shoreline in such a manner so that it will extend beyond the property line. However, there's an exception when it's to allow fill 18 inches waterward for a new bulkhead or seawall, as we talked about, or there's a provision that says that if that fill is needed to construct, repair, or maintain a living shoreline, such as mangroves, riprap, they can use it in that instance, but it'd have to be approved by the building official and community development director. But yeah, there's a new process people are using called geotubes. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with it, but you can basically take fill and put it into some sort of fabric tube, place it on a shoreline, and you can sod over it and basically extend someone's property line. So we had people in a contractor in North Palm Beach was going around and telling people, hey, I got this new process. Do you want to have a bigger backyard? And would go in and dig it up the Ermine River, put it in geotubes, and then sod it. And we had people complain like, how'd this happen? And so we had to dig up on it and found out that they had illegally dug, they'd illegally extended their property line. So we had to take them through all kinds of code enforcement action to do it. But it's not good for the environment, and of course it's not good for neighboring property owners. Don't want their neighbor extending their property any further out. So yes.
Is it fairly common for when someone wants to either upgrade or repair or create a bulkhead, seawalls, is it fairly common that they would construct a dock if there is not an existing dock at that time? And what about dredging so that their boat can have ingress and egress? Is that still allowed to go onto the owner's property?
Yeah, so our code has allowances for docks currently. So somebody could do that as long as they're within the current dock code. So yeah, if someone was repairing a seawall, let's say someone bought a new property and there wasn't a dock and they were doing a seawall, I mean, it's quite likely they would add a dock to that. They'd have to still go through, DEP or Army Corps if it's in the Indian River Lagoon. And that's another thing too, with the fill permit process. So, the DEP and Army Corps, of course, have jurisdiction over some of these areas, but they're not always responsive. They're not always, they don't always take the strongest approach on code enforcement. So even though they do have jurisdiction on fill, in the instance of a dock or someone illegally extending their property line, it's good for the village, I think, to also have some regulations so that we can crack down on it if they're not stepping up.
So where can one put dredged fill?
Currently, someone could put dredged fill on their own property,
Okay.
right? Or under the draft code, you can put it on your own property. Or if you were extending your existing bulkhead or seawall at 18 inches, you could do that. Or if you were doing a living shoreline, you could use a little bit of it in that case. But otherwise, you should not be using it to extend your property line.
And there's other agencies that they would need a permit from in order to dredge?
DEP and the locks, and then Army Corps and the Indian River Lagoon.
Okay, all right.
Next slide. Still on this one. So the fill permit process, it's really supposed to be challenging to get approval for. When I was in North Palm Beach, it wasn't used very often, and when it was, I think every time it was used, it was denied. But the process is the village council has to approve a permit. Public notice does go out to all neighbors within 300 feet. Because if someone's extending their property out, of course you want the neighbors to have some input in that. And then there's kind of criteria there where it says there shouldn't be a harmful obstruction of the water flow, there shouldn't be increased erosion or monetary damage on neighboring property owners. But there's also some instances maybe where some egregious situation is happening and maybe 2 or 3 property owners wanted to get together and apply for a fill permit. Maybe there would be an appropriate time for the village council to approve it, but generally this whole fill permit process is it's kind of good to have on the books just so that the village can kind of regulate things if, like I said, if Army Corps or the DEP isn't really stepping up and doing anything. Next slide. So also in our Chapter 76, which has the existing dock and seawall code, and this new code will go into Chapter 76. There's a whole section on variances because all of these docks and seawalls are typically in the residential zoning areas. Any variances would go to the Planning and Zoning Board. Things in the commercial zoning code go to Village Council. But essentially, there's criteria here for a variance. So if there is some situation where the new code is a little bit onerous or someone can't quite meet it, let's say they wanted to extend they're replacing an existing seawall and they wanted it to go out 22 inches, they can always apply for a variance for that. Or those new height requirements that we established, where we said it can be up to 4.5 feet in the non-flood zone and 5 feet in the flood zone. If someone had a good instance where they needed to be 5 feet and 6 inches, they could always apply for a zoning variance if they can kind of prove that there's a hardship there. And with that is my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Very nice.
I do have a question. You didn't go over it. It was 76-27. I think it was 27. It was lifts for boats.
So that's already in place.
Okay. Well, let me tell you.
So I shared the entire Chapter 76, which has the piers and other water devices.
Yeah.
Boat lifts.
So all those other things are in there. So I mean, if there's something in there that you think is inconsistent with what we're doing, it's definitely relevant to
I just needed explanation, kind of like how I needed some explanation on some of that other stuff, how it's written. On 1 and 2, Section 4. This is related to a boat lift. When in a fully raised position, no portion of such device or watercraft therein may protrude beyond 20 feet from the landward side of the adjacent platted property line.
From the landward side of the adjacent property line, yeah, so it says no more than 20 feet from the landward from the adjacent property
May
line?
protrude, wait a minute. No portion of the device, the lift,
Mhm.
or watercraft may protrude beyond 20 feet from the landward side of the adjacent
Okay,
platted.
so that's, so that people don't have a boat lift and have the boat like hanging over their neighbor's property,
Okay,
right? So, because you can have boat lifts and you could have multiple ones on a property, and you could technically have one right up to the property line, and someone's, you know, sitting in their pool next door and you're looking at a giant boat there. So it's kind of like, almost like a building setback, right?
Okay.
You want it to be a little bit further from the neighboring property.
all right, that answers both my questions, actually. I get it now. It's just, it's worded weird.
Can I have something when I can squeeze in for a second. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
Brad, were you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, so, and I don't know who said it, but I really liked, Jeremy, I really liked the thought that moving forward, it's not just two people saying, approving what these owners want to do or change. I like the thought, did you mention that the planning and zoning board also got involved? You know, just some more accountability than just two people choosing whether homeowners can do this or not. And I don't know what makes the most sense, but I did like that idea. And everything else I love. You know me, I love the natural, I love the mangroves. It is all awesome. So I'm on board with all of that.
Jill, I think that's a great recommendation. I mean, really, anytime you're taking a tough decision out of staff's hands,
Yeah,
that especially when there's, like Brad mentioned, there's not really like a hard and fast criteria to look at. That kind of protects us from criticism. So yeah, I'm happy to add that in if you all think that's a good recommendation.
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely think you don't want that falling on your shoulders.
Well, I think that it's okay to let it be planning and zoning board, but we should require a clear recommendation from the staff, whether it be building official and the director of community development, or both, that says what's their opinion about the efficacy of this application. I want
Yes,
us lay people, and the planning and zoning board consists of lay people. I want them to know what the experts think. And I don't want, Mr. Coastal Engineer for John Doe to come in here and make the planning and zoning board fall over dead and just say, approved. I don't like that.
I agree. I like it to keep it, local, the locals that live here.
Yeah, we could work that into the draft code where building official and community development director have to provide a recommendation to the planning and zoning board for final approval or denial. That's a good way to do it.
Another option is to let you guys decide, and then make it clear they can appeal to the planning and zoning board.
That's true, but that only protects instances where we've denied it. That protects the homeowner's ability to appeal it, but it doesn't really protect the general public if we make if we approve a bulkhead or seawall that people don't like, that they're not likely to appeal it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
No, you lost me. I'm sorry. So say it again about the public interest, etc.
Yeah, so if we were to deny someone's ability to do that, the person appealing it would be the property owner. They'd say, we disagree with your opinion, we're gonna appeal this to the planning and zoning board. But if we, staff, at the staff level, where no one in the village even knows this happens, right? The building official and I say, oh yeah, we agree, this is a disturbed shoreline, sure, you can do it. The public isn't really gonna know about it until a year down the road when it's already too late to appeal it. So
I know what you're saying. But of course, you're assuming people look at planning and zoning notices. but you wouldn't,
the way it's written, there isn't even a public notice.
Wouldn't there be the 300-foot requirement for them to make the mailings?
There would be, if you require that them to go to planning and zoning board, but if it was an administrative approval, it'd just be like a permit approval where there's no notice.
Okay, yeah,
I like the notice idea.
yeah. 300 feet, so basically,
Direct neighbors.
that's 3 lots on either side of a new bulkhead?
Yeah.
Approximately.
Okay.
3 months total. Should have 100 feet.
And across the way, I think.
100 next and 100 next.
Is everybody,
Anyone?
I was just waiting for everybody to
Question?
get.
No, no, I think.
No.
Oh, Tom hasn't even started yet?
Yeah, I'm just getting started. I'm getting warmed up. So, big picture, I think this is an excellent example of how, you know, all local governments in Florida are required to adopt a comprehensive plan. But most governments, including Tequesta, seem to take that document, put it on a shelf, and let it gather dust. All of what you're working on was actually, for the most part, all of it, was in the comp plan.
Mm-hmm.
So what
Correct.
when the comp plan is adopted, it is not over.
Correct.
Now it's the policies have to actually be implemented, and this is an example of implementation of things that were in the comp plan. And by the way, you have, I hope, all of our comp plan recommendations that we made.
We are working on that. That's like one of my next big tasks. So those are in the works.
Okay,
And
yeah,
it's
so
taken
this
us
is-
too long, but we've got commercial
This-
code rewrites.
So
and
this is
everything.
great, because it's actually implementing many comp plan policies.
Correct.
And, you know, my desire is for the village, when they upgrade the next comp plan, that the next steps are implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And what we used to do in Palm Beach, we had a giant memo that by department said, this is what you need to do.
Mhm.
This is what you need to do. And you need to do it by X, Y, and Z date. And then we had, by doing that, we had completed the process. And this is an example of completing the process for those policies that you referenced. So when I got this, at first I started reading all the other chapter stuff, and I said, wait a minute, finally I got to the sections that were being modified. But big picture, the takeaway that I had was, if you want to do a bulkhead, seawall, traditional armor kind of a thing, it's very evident that you got a lot of hassles to go through to get there, okay? But the other thing that stood out to me after I read it twice was, I didn't really know if I wanted to do riprap and mangroves, a natural living shoreline. I didn't really know what that document was telling me I had to do. But it's very clear what I have to do if I'm doing bulkheads and seawall. I see, just call them bulkhead. So I don't know, do you disagree with that assessment? You think that it's very clear what someone can do?
I think it was intentionally left to be a little bit not too prescriptive, kind of like I mentioned, where it's just you have to have 100% of it has to be revetment or mangroves. 10% of that has to be, at least 10% has to be mangroves, and then you can kind of play with it as you like. Because like I mentioned, there's instances where somebody may want to have all the mangroves in the middle of the property. They may want to have them all on this side of the property. They may want to have them all over here. So it was kind of written intentionally a little bit open-ended. If you wanted to make it more prescriptive and...
Well, a couple of just listen, I'm not an expert on this, although I've had overseen projects to build seawalls. How do I say it? I mean, so for example, would we have rules about whether you have to build it from the water or truck? What am I trying to get at? Do you truck in the riprap, or do you have to do it by boat? I mean, do the rocks have to be of a certain size? I mean, I don't know, is that, or should that be kinds of things that the code talks about? I don't know, I'm not an expert.
I mean, I use Jupiter as the model, and it's been in place since 2015. So, I mean, I've talked to Garrett over there briefly about it, who's kind of the one that wrote their code, and he seemed to think it was generally working fine. I could, circle back with him and ask how the actual design and construction works for the living shorelines, and to see if they think that they needed it to be a little bit more specific. But from what he said, there weren't really any challenges.
Yeah, so let me look at some of this stuff and just,
Sure.
I think you answered most
Can I
of
ask
it.
you a question?
Yes, go ahead,
While
Walt,
you're
you go
looking?
ahead.
Okay. So going back to that distinction between 100% riprap or mangroves, seems like the actual two choices are 100% riprap with 10% mangroves, or option B, 100% mangroves.
It can be any combination of it, though. It could be 50-50, it could be 60-40.
Oh,
It
see,
just
I
has the
didn't-
minimum. It's a minimum of 10% mangroves.
Okay, so that I didn't get conveyed as I'm looking at it, so maybe there's some words that can express that.
I
understand.
to be honest, I
keeping open
didn't love how Jupiter had described it either, and I thought I simplified it a little bit, but sounds like maybe I didn't simplify it enough. So I could probably wordsmith it to make it more clear.
Okay, and that point, and then going back to my thought process of seeing that riprap in that one picture where it went from the very bottom all the way up to the top of their seawall, and then there's other examples of riprap that is just in the water, say, I'm just gonna pick a number 2 feet above the surface that it's on. So is there a difference between the heights of that, the size of the boulders in terms of the living shoreline and the benefits, or does somebody go that high up because of tides? Where do we determine, because that didn't look so good, is basically what I'm getting to, is the one that went all the way up to the top of the seawall?
Mhm.
That's a tremendous amount of riprap.
Yeah, and that could have been done just as a kind of to supplement like a failing seawall.
It could, and I think I've seen that one out on the actual intercoastal portion where there's certainly a lot more traffic, and maybe there's something there. Just a thought that's going through my head of how many cubic yards is required, and how far up can they go with this, and does that affect the two neighbors when they go up that high? Does it create a width that becomes like a channel on one side of it to the neighbor on the adjacent side? Just
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is spelled out in there how much or how tall the riprap can be and how it has to slope 2 to 1, I believe.
There is some slope
Is there?
requirements in there.
but from any specific height?
Well, wasn't there a height?
I saw height on the seawall.
I wish I had the code in front of me.
Yeah, but anyway,
That's
just,
right.
so
I could have
just
sworn
things
I
to.
saw something.
But yeah, there is some of that in there. I just
Okay.
can't remember it off the top of my
That's
head.
it, just keep
Well,
those
you
in mind.
know, if someone builds a seawall, no matter what, it's expensive.
Very,
Very,
very.
very expensive. But if I don't have waterfront property, but if I did, and I had to do a seawall today, and let's say the norm was, a 7-foot seawall with a cap on it of X, I would be out of my mind if I didn't go higher than that because of sea level rise.
Mm.
Why,
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know what is reasonable, but I would not want to base it on today's water level factors because we all know what's coming. It's just when is it coming?
So that North Palm Beach study used future sea level rise projections from the South Florida sea level rise collection, whatever it was. So they were looking, I think it was out to 2060 or 2070, basically the lifespan of all, kind of newer seawalls that were getting built. So that's where that 4.5 foot and 5 foot height cap kind of came from.
I'm seeing with the newer homes I do live on the water side, and some homes that are being built on the west side of the Loxahatchee River, which is Palm Beach County, I presume. The seawall that's going in over there right now is tremendously high and extremely unattractive. That's why I was asking what the other agencies or other municipalities or counties are doing, because it's extremely.
Is the house still standing?
It's all new.
It's, oh, the house is new?
It's coming in after the seawall. So the reverberation of water going back and forth is going to be really something.
I've seen that happen down in Miami-Dade at Sunny Isles Beach. They've got a single-family neighborhood with, you know, some waterfront on it, and I saw one time that they demolished the home, new owner, built one that looked like a giant seawall, then they put the fill in to match it.
Right.
And then the house was towering over everybody.
Right.
And that was it. And then multi-million-dollar homes, and it is one of the weirdest subdivisions I have ever seen.
Do we have height restrictions on fill to build? Because I know they can get their height restrictions increased by increasing their fill on a property. Do we have restrictions on how high that fill can go?
I should know that, but I don't really deal with the permitting side of that. The building official would know.
Just another thing to throw in our little inquiries, because that's interesting as well.
So I'll try to go as fast as I can. I had some comments about the mutual consent thing as well, and I felt like it might open the door to appeals. You know, maybe Wayne thought it was okay, you didn't, and now they're going to appeal it, and it didn't seem good. And then another thing to keep in mind, and I know Charlie Eisman, I forgot Charlie's how to say it, but not necessarily him, but you know, it could be pretty easy to get a structural engineer or a coastal engineer to send you a letter saying we think that a bulkhead and a seawall is the only way to go, and then sign and seal it. And so laymen will think, oh, okay, we have no choice. Well, I want to make it where we have the option to decide how that goes down. Not we, EAC, I mean the village. The seawall cap of 3 feet, I don't think I've ever seen one that far like that. And it makes me think that that is so far out beyond the wall that you might have to cantilever the thing to keep it from collapsing. I mean, that's just a comment. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seems like 2 feet would be better in my mind, but if you guys think you don't have to cantilever it or something, it just seemed odd. I mean, you're talking about a yardstick out beyond the wall.
Yeah.
36 inches.
I've seen some close to that. I'll double check with Wayne on that, but yeah, I mean, lowering it to 2 feet probably, you know, that's something we could probably do.
It was just a comment. I mean, I'm not an expert. I just thought it sounded a little odd to me, so I brought it up. Okay, so you answered my question about when we said in, like, for 76-34, for example, the introduction says, you know, shall be faced with riprap or mangroves, and I kept thinking, shouldn't it be and or? Because I've seen people, in fact, I have a slide somewhere at home where there's this device that people are inserting inside of riprap where the mangroves grow literally out of the riprap and in front of the riprap. So maybe I can find that for you, but
Yeah, I'll clean up how that's written. I agree, it's confusing, and I mean, I think the end goal is just to have at least 10% be mangrove.
so my question here is, why not require, so this is the guy or gal that builds a bulkhead or a seawall, okay? And they get approval to do so. So what this document basically is doing, and you may not think it's a problem, but it jumped out at me, is that you're basically developing the need for a long-term relationship with whoever builds a bulkhead, because they got to come back within 2 years. They got to do X, Y, and Z at final inspection.
It keeps
Why don't you just make it so that before they get the CEO or the final inspection, they have to do it?
The problem is there's a grow-in period with mangroves. You know, it's tough to have them fully established when you're getting the CEO of the seawall, right? So someone will construct the seawall itself, and then once that seawall is completed, they would then come in after the fact and put the riprap and the mangroves in, right? And so there has to be some. It's kind of like a secondary thing that happens after the CO.
Okay, but
So-
you want to give them 2 years to do that?
I mean, I can follow back up with Jupiter, see how that's worked out for them. I mean, I think they said it's been okay for them, but I can double check
I
on
mean, you
it.
have to create a tickler file, right? I mean, that's another hassle, is to make sure that John Doe, in 2 years, he's done it. I mean, but it's that, you know,
I like the fact that we have to go back and check, so it keeps them from ripping them out.
Mhm.
yeah, but it puts the burden on staff to remember to do that.
Oh, true.
There's also, like I said, the punitive side, where if you're not at that 10% mangrove number, you have to go in and just plant 20% on the spot. So
Right.
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to be caught with your hand in the cookie jar on that one.
Yeah, I like that actually.
We already talked about mutual consent. It seemed, I would suggest, my takeaway when looking at 76-36, which is riprap and mangrove installation, was that if you built a bulkhead, you got a lot of things to do in the life of that bulkhead with the village. And it might even cause them to say, you know, I'm not even going to do it unless they catch me, or so. There's a lot of stuff here. But if this is what Jupiter did, that's probably our best chance to get the council to approve something, is that our neighbor did it. And I believe that's it. The fill requirement we talked about. And you offered the public hearing by PZ&B as opposed to village council. I guess you'd put your notice on the village's notice thing. It's now saving thousands of dollars. Expiration valid for, the village seemed, tell me what you think, Jay. It's this section 7644A. The permit issued is valid for 2 years from the date thereof, but shall be automatically revoked if the proposed work is not completed within such period except for good cause. And it goes on to say the renewal of any permit prior to 60 days after its expiration may be granted. I think we're very liberal on the amount of time we give people to do things. So in other words, even though it says 2 years in renewal, but it could go on ad infinitum, because there's no point in time where, I'm sorry, you're out of luck. You got to go back to go again. That's just my opinion. I mean, and if you're a neighbor to something that's going on ad infinitum, you're going to get angry after a while. Trust me. And I just don't. I would like it to be, you know, maybe good for 1 year, and if you don't do it in 1 year, you got to come back and start from scratch. That's all. Those are all the comments I had.
Anything else?
No,
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
yeah, thank you.
Next item, numero 3, EAC update to Village Council at the July 29th workshop. Let's see, I think Tom put together a list of items that we have at least addressed for the past year. I will say, first off, it would probably be most important and appropriate, maybe not important, but appropriate for the chair of the EAC to speak. However, I have a hard conflict on the 29th. I won't be in town. So if we are to do this, someone else is going to have to step up and be the speaker.
It was, what, July 29th? Is that what it
Yes.
was?
It's a Monday. I think it's, what was it, 2?
It's 2 weeks from next Monday.
Well, I think Michelle can do it.
Tom, you'll be there anyways, won't you?
I haven't been coming lately. I've been so busy. I can't come tomorrow, for example. Where is that documentation I'm looking for? Yeah, I guess I'll have to do it, because I agreed to be vice chair.
Sorry.
When is it, July 29th?
Yes,
So, Jay, this is just to make it clear in my mind, generally what the EAC has been up to over the past years. It's kind of a report almost. What about the recommendations from EAC on items that we had discussed in the past that we would like the council to consider, moving on or moving forward with? Is that something that we would want to address at that meeting as well, right?
Well, the way that I think they want it to be is, what have you done since your last report? And I think the last report was it 2022 or 2023? Late 20, well, it wouldn't be late 2023 because I would have been on council then. So it might have been middle of 2023, March, April, I think. Might have been the last time I went. And in that report, I'm pretty sure I told them all of the recommendations that we had made at that time, but they didn't take any action because the meeting is actually a workshop, so they can't take action. But I'm going from memory, so I could be wrong, but I think in this last year, say from, say all of 2023, and maybe till April of this year, I forgot how I did it, but there weren't that many recommendations. We were deep into comp plan review, and I just don't remember that many of it taking place. But if there had been, it would be the time to tell them that, hey, we made this recommendation, we didn't hear anything, and I'd like to know what you think about it or something.
Would those be in this?
Yeah, I went down, what I did is I went to every meeting and pretty much followed the agendas to see what was there, and sometimes to add a little flavor as to what I recall happening. So if I go, I'll resurrect the first, there's a memo floating around out there that I did the last time. I'll just use that, attach that, and go and give them a short presentation and ask them if they have any questions, basically. Does that sound good to y'all?
Yeah.
Yes, I don't.
Yeah.
And I can work with the draft, with you on that draft and circulate it to everyone for feedback before it goes out. I think the agenda will go out maybe 5 days before that meeting, so in like a week or two.
Okay.
Kind of circulate the draft. I do think it would be good to also maybe even use it to ask them about, kind of for consent to work on future things, like the tree code, you know, which we're gonna get to next, but if the board decides that that's a project you wanna prioritize, maybe getting village council consent to have staff help with that process would be good.
Well, I've got when we get to the tree subject, I think I've got some thoughts that will put your mind at ease relative to where we might be going. Attachment, what am I supposed to do? I'm gonna do a memo and attachment, send to Jay. Jay distributes to the EAC for comment, right? So I'll do that in the next 48 hours, Jay.
And yeah, I think that also might be a good idea, as you guys kind of read through this list, pick out, I think, three things that you think are the most important, or 4 or 5 or whatever, to give maybe Tom a little bit of a roadmap onto what, you know, if we all come up with a consensus of, you know, 2 or 3 things that we think are the most important, it'll direct where you need to speak the most about.
So what an EAC member would do would be, they get the document from Jay that I create, and they add their comments or those top 3, 4, or 5, whatever you want it to be, and send it back to Jay, and Jay will let me know what those are.
So really,
So who we
Well, it's
sending?
convoluted, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
it's
called-
called to have sunshine by.
Love the
Yeah, it's
sunshine.
It's called government, right? Sunshine and the
Okay. All right,
Red tape.
that works.
So what's the process? We're going to go through this, look for our top number and
then wait for
Give it to-
his draft to
Correct.
come.
Jay's draft
Give
is
it-
gonna come, what I give him is gonna come to you, and then you be prepared to say, here's my top 3, is that?
That's
fair?
fine.
Top
Right.
3 things that we think the
Back to
council,
Jay.
and then they go back to Jay.
okay.
And they may already be
And we can do
included.
this through email?
Yes.
Only to Jay
Okay.
though, right?
Yeah,
Do
only-
not respond.
Only to Jay.
Do not hit all.
Did you say don't hit all?
Yeah, so no, you know, no sunshine violations.
Oh, geez,
I
okay.
know.
So just you.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
That's the safe route, Jill.
Okay, thanks. I do need that reminder, because I'm good at hitting all.
Reply at all.
Okay, thank you.
All right. You guys have anything else on this? Anything to add? Nothing? You need to speak about anything else on this?
No, I think I know what I'm supposed to do.
All right.
You do have citizen comment.
That's all right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right, it's covered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Shout louder. I'm sorry. Okay, so the next item, tree code discussion.
Can I give you guys just a quick presentation?
Yeah. Because the backup was extensive.
That I blame that on Tom. He sent that to me, and hope you didn't print that all out.
No.
All right, so I just want to give a quick rundown on the tree canopy while we're talking about trees. Meg and I, next slide. So we found the state of Florida conducted a 61-page urban tree canopy assessment in December of 2023 with a company called Planet Geo from Colorado. I will email that to the board after the meeting. It's got a lot of good material in it. That company that did the project also created a website and /app called Tree Plotter that shows the urban canopy in cities all around the state. And the urban canopy assessment analyzed the urban tree canopy in every Florida municipality between 2013 and 2021. And I will show you the app and the findings. So here's Tequesta and some nearby cities. So our urban tree canopy coverage is currently 26%. It went up about 5.4% between 2013 and 2017. Could be that, you know, there just weren't really any storms coming through at that time, and the canopy was just naturally growing. Then from the second one says UTC changed 2013, 2017. It should be 2017 to 2021. So it went down 0.4% in that period. And you'll notice that's kind of a general trend that happened in a lot of the other cities. I think that's also kind of coincides with development picking back up after that, you know, late 2010s, early 2010s recession. So overall, from 2013 to 2021, our urban tree canopy is up 5%. However, it did trend down just a little bit, kind of in the later portion. Also, when you just look at the overall tree canopy coverage compared to all these other cities, you notice like Palm Beach Gardens is 33%. They have a massive preserve area, like the Loxahatchee Slough, that covers a big portion of their municipality. So, you know, North Palm Beach has MacArthur State Park, but then, you know, Jupiter and the Colonies 20%, Juno Beach is 21%. We're, you know, right kind of in line with Stewart. So we're, you know, we're in an okay spot overall. Next one. So here's the Tree Plotter app. It actually breaks down the tree canopy coverage by census block. So there's a bunch of different ones throughout the village. Next slide. So this is the country club area. The canopy there is 28%, which I think was our highest. It went up 5% overall from 2013 to 2022, but only went up, I think, what, 1% from 2017 to 2022. Next one. West of Seabrook, then east of the North Fork, also 28%. So as you see, those are, you know, primarily residential areas where you've got a really established tree canopy, and they're both seem to be relatively healthy. Next one. So this is a small little sliver south of Quest Drive. You know, smaller lot sizes, maybe not as extensive of a tree canopy. So here it's only 20%, and it's had, you know, kind of a, you know, gone up 4% since 2013. Next slide. North of Tequesta Drive, 26% here, 4% overall change, but it's gone down 2% in the last couple years. Next one. So this is east of the FEC line, west of US 1 and north of Tequesta Drive, 27% in 2022, but it was 31% in 2017, so we've lost about 4% of the canopy there. Not sure fully what that's from, but maybe from some developments in the area. Next slide. This is the eastern Tequesta. This is a lot of the kind of the US 1 corridor, especially east of US 1. You know, naturally with commercial properties, you're going to have you know, a lower tree canopy. So there it's 18%. It's gone down 1% in the past few years. Next slide. Beach Road corridor, we're only at 17% here, and we've actually declined 6% in the past few years. Could be related to some development. Not really sure there, but just wanted to show you this. Thought it was some really interesting stuff. I'll send you a link to that study and also to that app that you can kind of play around with. And that's it.
A couple of things, if I may. Why my take on the code is that there are in effect requirements that if you demolish a home and before dealing with the landscaping, my take on what I read in the code was that I think it's the building official needs to approve the tree plan.
Okay, thanks.
What?
Unrelated.
Unrelated? That has to be approved before you can cut down any trees that are in excess of a trunk diameter of a certain size. And I don't know if that's happening, but that's something we need to look into to make sure that compliance is taking place, because I heard Brad talking about earlier, unrelated to what I just said, well, it is related, but is that he's seeing the country club, the tear downs, and then I've seen him when I drive mostly on Country Club Drive, some of which would be Country Club Point, and they tear down the house, and then there's not a standing, living piece of landscaping at all. I mean, so are they looking to see if the requirements for the keeping certain trees are there, and then if, for example, if it's right in the dab of where this guy wants to build his new home, well then he can get it taken down, but then he has to put something else in its place. So I'd like us to look at it. I think it's great we're a tree city now. Are we planning to get the signs up that tell the world on certain corridors that we are a tree city?
We still have to get approved as a tree city. So
Oh,
we've
okay.
done all the criteria, we have to wait for their approval process. So that might take a little while.
I saw that you are a fan of the urban grant for trees. Did you get a response from Jeremy as to how much money is in the proposed budget for tree planting expansion?
He and I talked about it a couple weeks ago. I think he's probably listening right now. I think it's 25,000.
So if we did the grant, we might get $50,000, right? If they,
That's whatever we put in.
yeah.
So 50,000 total.
I think that's great. The more money you get, the better from tree plantings. That's all I had to say about that. Those three thoughts occurred to me while I was looking at this presentation. That's very interesting.
It is.
I hate to volunteer another employee for work, but do you want me to see if I can get the building department to kind of come out and give an overview of what they're looking at during the construction process as far as tree protection goes?
Oh,
Yes.
100%, I think that'd be
Yes,
great.
absolutely.
They're willing to do
Because
that.
that's part of our lowering greenhouse gases with trees, and
Yeah,
it falls into
and-
that.
And it'll relate to what I'm about to say about the tree assignment things that we're going to be talking about. So let me just, yeah, I can say it from heart. So the idea of trees potentially being a problem in some ways in Tequesta emanated from Jessica Name. Okay, she brought it to the table and we talked about it. And I think that emanated from a problem that she had in her neighborhood relative to eucalyptus trees or something. And so that caused me to look at the prohibited tree/plant list that we have. And what I think we need to do, it's evident to me that we may have some trees that are on our list of prohibited trees that are either not there that should be there, or are okay and should be removed, okay? So that is a very simple thing to do. We have to just pick one of these sources that you see. I would defer to Jay as to what he thinks, but let's say, and I don't agree with this, I'm just using an example. Let's say South Florida Water Management District is our go-to guide, okay? Then we look at their list, and like for example, I could do a spreadsheet, and here I've got our list of trees, their list of trees, and we can see which ones we either have or don't have that we should have. And then that's that. We'd have to bring it here, and the board looks at it and they say, okay, we think we should do X, and then that's what we recommend to the village council, that they change the code just to that one section to do whatever we come up with. And so one of the questions, the first question is, who will be our comparative group to compare to relative to trees? The second question is, do we want to delve into the non-tree items that are on that list? And I think that could be problematic because there's a lot of stuff, vegetation that's invasive that's not a tree. And that list is huge, okay? And so that's when it starts to become overwhelming for us to deal with. So I would say for starters, if you feel like we should do it, then we could do it. But I would say, let's focus on trees right now and worry about the other later, if at all, okay? Now, the other thing that came up probably by virtue of work I did since the last meeting and emails to Jay and so forth is that it's very evident to me that when he provided us with the Atlantic Beach Code, I don't know if you all got a chance to look at that, that was like a revelation because it's almost as if everything pertaining to trees in that city is in that one code. DeQuesta's code is the opposite. It is spread all over the place about trees. An average person just gets frustrated. They just, they think they have it, but then they might realize that, no, I don't know the totality of what I have to do in regard to trees. It's everywhere. And that's problematic, and it's indicative of the fact that I mentioned to the council recently at a meeting that they need to update their code. It has not been changed from start to finish since I came here in 1986. So that's a long time. And it's not as hard as you think it is. I've done it before in Palm Beach. They assigned me to oversee rewriting the entire code of ordinances, but leaving out the zoning code, okay? That's a big piece of trees, but doing that is just a systematic process, and you eventually get it done. You don't start from scratch and start saying, now therefore, blah, blah, blah. It's not that. You just take it to the deciding committee and say, is the current verbiage okay? If not, what does it need to say? And then it's a lot of paperwork, but it's not as hard as you think. But I'm not suggesting we do that. That's what I want to make Jade understand. That's a major undertaking. It would take staff time. And at this moment, I don't think we should even get into that because it is the domain of the village council to change that code, and that's a process that would be set up using the input of the village attorney and the people that the city manager says need to be involved with it. Now we can eventually, once we get done with the prime mission, as I see it, is let's look at the trees on the list and see if it needs to be updated. That's it for right now. In my mind, you can disagree with me, and we'll do it accordingly. We do that, and then we can say, do we really want to get into the trees and the code thing or not? Probably not. If I had to vote on it today, I'd say no. So that's my idea. Let's focus on the trees. Let's look at the tree list, and in order to do that, I'd like for Jay to say which list of prohibited plantings that's in that backup that I provided to you. It's in the night. Which one do you want us to compare to for our tree list?
And what I'll do too, sorry to interrupt, but I'll get Steve Parker, who's the village's landscape architect, to provide some input on it. I believe he's the one who created that prohibited species list, and it's supposed to be to focus, so the village would focus more on native plantings. So I'll pick his brain a little bit on that.
So that original list probably came out of a result to make sure that the village properties were not using non-native, sort of, not necessarily residential. I mean, we're looking at residential as well.
It's all of the above.
Right, okay. Because residential does have its own little,
Well, so you wanna do that in addition to what we start to do? Because,
Would it be helpful if I had Steve Parker come give a, would it be helpful if I had Steve Parker come give a presentation about the prohibited species list and his whole idea of creating Florida-friendly landscaping? And then I could also even have Wayne or somebody from the building department come talk about kind of the enforcement side, and we could just have a kind of a tree workshop at a meeting, and then figure out where to go from there.
the more information.
Sounds
Yeah, that works
Yeah.
for me.
Appropriate.
It keeps
Right.
educating me on
So
all
I
this
won't,
process.
I won't be in the August meeting, but I could set that up to have that in September, and it'll give them some lead time, and hopefully we can prepare, or have a really healthy discussion about all that stuff.
Could you do it for October?
so we just sit on, we don't need to do anything until after we hear from those people in
Yeah, I think
September.
it'd be good to have a really, you guys could have a more well-informed discussion if you can hear from them first.
Yeah.
So we talk about these lists, okay, the list of prohibited species from UF-IFAS, from South Water Management District, from these various agencies. I mean, there's got to be some commonality,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
think.
So that's just like a clerical thing, right? You just, you
Yeah.
can sort and dedupe everything and.
Spreadsheet and.
Yeah,
See what's
spreadsheet is
common.
probably what I would use. Let me look at the list.
Do you want me to have, sorry Meg, I could have Meg kind of look at both lists from an Excel and just see which ones are in both lists, and that might be a good starting point too.
Yeah, I mean, so they're all gonna be somewhat similar, but there's gonna be a core list of prohibited species that each one probably has, so let's start off with that.
The core.
Mhm.
And we could probably also look at the prohibited species list of surrounding communities too, just so we're consistent with what other cities
Yeah.
are also doing.
And I also think it would be important for Russ to be here
Yeah.
for these discussions, because he's kind of our resident expert on vegetation and trees and.
What is it looked like to me, Jay, that the current, let's call it, the current top dog expert is the Florida Invasive Species Council.
Correct.
That looks like it to me. But, you know, like I think I wrote in the email to you when I sent all this stuff, was that, you know, I looked at the University of Florida, Florida-friendly portion of their website, and they have an online list of things that you can do, like, but it wasn't, you know, like a list where you could just dive into the list and copy paste in a spreadsheet or anything like that. But they do make it clear that they don't prohibit non-native plants. They just prohibit or recommend prohibition of non-native plants that are invasive. And they say things like, it can be a colorful addition to a Florida landscape and things like that, to have those things added. So, I don't know, we can wait to hear from Parker, but it looks like it might be the FISC, whatever it's called, might be the go-to place, but we can wait. So we got a game plan?
Yeah, I'd like to hear
Yeah, I
from
think so.
the two departments.
Sounds like
Definitely.
Yeah,
September we
the-
can
the-
gather more info.
Get
Right,
on board from-
right.
Yep.
That's perfect.
All right. Is that all for this?
For
this
tree
subject?
code, yeah.
Did you have any more comments on
I
it?
do, no, I'm good with that. I do have a couple of quick updates, if you want to do it now, or.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so, Jay Lona is gonna be opening a new trail to the US one portion of their site.
Yeah.
So they're doing a grand opening, ribbon cutting, on the 17th, which is that next Wednesday? I think it's next Wednesday, at 5:30.
Yeah.
The mayor will be there, It'd be great if Chair Freeze or Vice Chair Bradford could be there as well.
What time of day?
It's at 5:30, so people can show up after work and hopefully it won't be as hot.
I can do that.
Also, it was done by an Eagle Scout as part of the Eagle Scout project, so it's a really,
wonderful.
really cool thing. I actually walked back there a little bit, it looks good, so.
Nice.
If one of you could attend, that'd be great. You don't have to let us know now, but maybe just email me or let me know.
I think
I can
Michelle
be
said
there.
she wants to do that.
And I can go as well on that day. More the merrier.
We'll see if we can get you part of the ring
Yeah,
thing.
hold-
You hold the scissors. And then another thing, I know you guys talked about looking at the reef situation. The Reef Institute's Executive Director, Lanisha Fix, is presenting to Village Council tomorrow night. So she's giving an overview on that. I think the mayor had asked her to do that. So I might try and grab her and see if she can also come speak to you guys as well. Is that who you've been reaching out to?
No. The person I've been reaching out to is from the Department of Environmental Protection, Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection. And I have heard from her. I'm still trying to confirm in August.
It should be Zoom or in person.
Not sure yet, but do I coordinate with you if I have a presenter that needs to be on Zoom? Or?
Yeah, sounds good. Let me know.
Okay. Anything else?
And that's it.
Okay for you? Yeah, so that was one of the things that I wanted to update. Another presentation that is confirmed for next month is Sue from the Jupiter Narrows Conservation Alliance. And she does need Zoom access to give her presentation on the efforts that she's had or the Conservative Alliance has had with mangrove restoration in the Jupiter Narrows.
Has she ever appeared before us? I know that she has counsel. And she had me go to her original kickoff meeting a 3 years ago. But I can't remember if it doesn't matter. She's requested to come, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, as long as I've been here, I don't recall her being here, but, okay, that's. Other comments? Questions,
None?
anything?
Are we on any other matters?
No, I think that's the last one on here.
Not yet.
What is the subject matter we're on?
The comments.
Comments,
Comments.
okay.
I'm sticking to the agenda. I mean, I don't want to be that guy.
You're doing the right guy. You're doing the right thing. So I want to thank you for agreeing to be the chair. And I want to encourage you to do some of the following. They do have a preferred format. They like to receive your proposed agenda for each upcoming meeting. They can tell you that, they can share that with you, etc. There are deadlines that they have for receipt of that so that they can do a notice to the public and gets so on and so forth. They should tell you what all that is. And the one thing that I think is important is that don't be afraid as chair to just tell them what you want to be on the agenda. You don't have to ask him, is it okay for this to, if you want it, put it there, and he will tell you if it's not proper, or if it's untimely, or whatever. He'll be your backstop, okay?
He'll be the city manager, really. He's the one. He's the last filter.
Yeah, so I just want you to feel free, because if there's something that you do is out of bounds, they will let you know one way or the other.
And Brad, I'll reach out after this. We'll set up the time to meet and just get on the same page with agendas, and it'll be good.
Yep.
So we'll find a time to meet.
I did just think of something. As previous meetings, we discussed about having educational pieces in the smoke signals. And when is the next smoke signals coming up?
Let's see, where are
I don't have the deadline for it yet, but I'll get it and I'll send it to you
Okay.
guys with my, other emails.
Is there a topic that we have of interest? Would you like me to write that and submit that one? Do that?
You know, I come across stuff all the time that would be beautiful in the smoke signals.
But I'm thinking
But
like-
they have this copyright requirement thing, and,
Oh, right.
and, you know, like, for one time I found a beautiful thing about, where do you take the weird stuff to be recycled? You know, not the plain old paper and stuff. And it was fantastic in AARP magazine, and, I got a digital copy of it, but, you know, I had to get AARP's approval to put it in smoke signals. So tracking them down wherever they are, they never responded to me. I followed all their stuff. So, you know,
But maybe this could be an update on what EAC is looking at in terms of the trees, the living shoreline. Do you want to give them an update, or do you want to have a article that is of an educational nature in terms of what you can do in your home, or where you could take your broken printer for disposal types? What do you see in the next?
I think at one of our meetings anyway, one of the topics that we were talking about for an educational piece was mangroves and pruning mangroves, and I think we were even going to cite, what was the big, I forget where it was, I think it was in Stewart.
St. Lucie.
St.
Port
Lucie.
St. Lucie, or, yeah.
Where,
The
you know,
hotel
they got hammered from an enforcement standpoint.
Right.
And
Was anybody specific going to write that, or do you want me to go forward?
I'm just throwing it out as,
Yeah,
I
that was
remember
one
that being
discussion.
one of the ideas of discussion, starting the, you know, saying, okay, well, we don't want this to happen to anyone who has mangroves behind their house, and then give them some sort of information on what is allowable.
Does the village have approved mangrove landscapers? Or is that, because it has to be certified by some department?
they,
You have to be a Florida certified, or there's some certification you have to do, which I can find for you.
Okay, so I will send you an email to see if we have.
I have a timing question about this. So, in your mind, Jay, when do you think the council will hear the shoreline protection plan you've set forth?
So I'm actually taking it to the planning and zoning board next week too. So it'll go to council in either August or September, so.
For first reading?
So it could kind of, your article
So
could
if we
kind of
want
align
to time that
with that.
article with that, we.
Well,
that
here's
is-
what tell me if I'm wrong, please. So, to me, when I'm thinking about a report that might include the disaster that occurred for a property owner in Port St. Lucie relative to their mangroves, do we want to let people be reminded of that when we're wanting to encourage them to plant mangroves?
And that's a commercial application,
Oh, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So do we want this to be more about how we're educating on
Residents.
mangroves, and here's some information ready for you? A lot of people, oh, where do I go? Where do I get, who
Yeah.
has to certify this? Where, you know, where's
Okay.
that
What are
information
the
come
steps
from?
in the process?
What are the steps, what are the
Yeah.
requirements? I wouldn't know.
Benefits,
either.
benefits of having mangroves.
Benefits, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing with the Living Shorelines Code is also afterwards educating people to, you know, encouraging them to do it. Even if you're not replacing the bulkhead or seawall, how can we still get you to do this?
Okay. And we'll find
I
out when the
think-
next smoke news signals is to see that it coordinates with that piece with the village.
I think it's like, it's either September or October, maybe? Didn't we get one like a month ago in the mail?
I don't know, I always get the Friday, yeah, we did get one recently. I always get the Friday updates.
So that would have been, say, let's say May or April.
I think it might have been June.
Spring.
Spring.
What month is spring?
spring starts,
March,
roughly
April, May.
March
All right.
22nd.
So another one be coming out for June, July, August, summer? Do we want it to come out for the fall? Well,
Well,
we'll
you
figure
have
that
to,
out.
your
Okay.
best bet is to call Lori, and she can confirm it.
We'll figure out what that timing is, which issue it goes in. Okay. I'm happy to write that. And if I remember correctly, I submit it to Lori, and then she can send it to all of you for input,
Right.
and then back can.
Get approved.
This may come out in Christmas.
She wants us to proof what you've turned in?
No, if you want to add some input, like if you
Oh.
think, oh, you know, this
Just
is
an
great,
opportunity
but.
for comment.
I
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
okay.
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 So, have you, well, maybe it's not you, it might be Lori. We now have an opening on the EAC.
Mm.
It was put on social media, and I believe it's on the website as well, so it's out
Okay.
there.
All right.
Okay.
If you know anybody, of course, tell your networks.
We could put it on our community associations and see
Mhm.
some opening.
All right. Any other comments? Next, future agenda items. This is,
Trees.
the tree list.
The tree list, yeah. Presentation from Steve Parker and Wayne Cameron, building
Yep.
official. That's coming up probably September, it sounded like.
Yeah.
Narrows presentation.
The Narrows presentation, hopefully the bleaching or the coral reef restoration, conservation presentation. Do you guys have anything?
For old business, looking at what the village would like to look at in terms of our, not LEED city certification, but our own incentives for building and creating an award, or looking if there's already an award that could be attached to. But maybe not with all this other going on, maybe we start looking back at that in the fall.
So Meg has actually been doing some research on that.
Okay.
And probably in September,
Okay.
we'll do a presentation. But
Okay.
since you've been working on that, do you want to meet with us and talk about it?
That'd be great, yes, okay,
We'll set a time to talk.
okay,
Get that going.
all right.
I did just think of something. So, what was it? How do I say it? I saw something recently that indicated that I attended a public hearing sort of thing by the water utility department, who's overseeing the vulnerability assessment that the village is doing for like things like rising sea levels and so forth. And I was the only one there, and it's evident relative to how the report was presented to us that the biggest entity that has a problem in terms of the number of sites that are potentially impacted by rising sea levels is the Loxahatchee River District and its sanitary sewer, they call them lift stations, I call it pumping stations. And there's no evidence that the Loxahatchee River District has ever done anything to identify where their vulnerabilities are. There's no evidence to indicate that they have are actually aware of the grant program from the state of Florida to help you make those assessments. And they may be playing, not on purpose, but just being an ostrich with its head in the sand. And then, you know, these sanitary lift stations serve the citizens of Tequesta. In other words, when there is rising water from a hurricane, it is not unusual to have sewage back up into a toilet or into a bathtub, and it's a disaster. And you can't flush, even if that doesn't happen, you can't flush because it's out of service. And it will, as people continue to flush, it will eventually back up into your house. So it's very important in my mind that we get Loxahatchee River District on board with dealing with vulnerability assessment. And most of the cases identified, the way I understood it in the verbal presentation is, they need to raise the height of their mechanical and electrical equipment associated with those pump stations. I don't know what the first step is. You may recall that I wrote to the director of Loxahatchee River when I was chair about something that's escaping me at the moment. Something to do with what they're supposed to do under the comp plan, maybe. I heard nothing except crickets. We need you. I know how you deal with people like that, organizations like that. You put pressure on them through your elected officials and other elected officials that are served by such a district, and they will capitulate eventually. You have to put them under your thumb, and then they'll do what you want them to do, because that's how they play the game. We only do what we want to do until you force us to do something else. So we have that problem. I think we need to make sure that they know, we know, they've done nothing. I don't know, I'm not saying it's our job. I'm just saying.
That's a storm resiliency. I mean, that's
is.
a major utility that needs to be.
It is. Maybe I should add that to my
confidence in-
report to the council.
I was gonna suggest that.
Yeah, that's a big
Sounds like
one.
it.
I mean, the whole village.
All
agrees.
right, I'll tell them, do you want, what should I tell them? I mean, I don't want to say, I know what I would say, but I don't want to say something that you guys don't agree with.
Well, I think what you just
Well, you
said,
just said that there's
I mean,
no accountability, there's no record of, not maintenance, but what did you say?
Undertaking any review of potential vulnerabilities.
Yes, exactly. 'Cause as a
and the
village-
effect that it would have on the citizens or residents of DeQuesta.
Especially with our predicted storm season.
Maybe you simply ask for the city manager or the mayor to have them come speak to council about what they're doing.
That's great.
That is good.
Yeah, okay, I'll do it. Okay, sorry to say that, it just popped in my head.
That's actually very important.
That's a really important
Something
start, Tom. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Something I was unaware of as well.
Well, you know what they did, they put it on what they call their utility calendar, but it didn't go to Lori McWilliams, who puts it on the, I don't know, the universal all-seeing and all-knowing calendar, I don't know. But it ended up on my Google Calendar, so I called them and said, I don't see it on your calendar, Laura. She said, oh, well, that's a utility matter. It's not on my calendar. So maybe those kind of things should be, so people learn more about them in the future.
That's a big one.
All right.
So, is that it?
Any other future agenda items other than the
Not at
ones
the
we
moment.
just discussed? Okay. Anything else?
Thank you both for taking these positions.
Oh, you're
Looking
welcome.
forward to
You're
working
welcome.
with it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
The last thing would be if you want to leave, I need a motion.
I would like to make a motion to end this meeting.
Adjourn. I'll second.
Second. All right, meeting's adjourned.
Okay.
All in favor, say.
Oh, sorry. I
Look
swear
at
to
that.
God.
It's even 1 minute done. Bye, Joe.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Bye,
Joe.
Joe.
Bye, guys.
Mondays and